Hi, my name is Steve Lozier. I'm an education specialist in the Metropolitan School District of Wayne Township, focused on the planning and implementation of project-based learning units in our schools. This module is one of many designed to help teachers better understand project-based learning and design and develop PBL units to engage and challenge their students. This presentation is available to you by following the link in the My Big Campus bundle, as well as the Google folder associated with it. And I'd suggest you open this presentation in another tab, or the one found there, as you may want to pause this video and click on a link or a resource in the presentation to explore further. And please note, if you are new to PBL and building your knowledge, this video will be considered the 7th in the sequence. So, PBL, leveraging student groups and teaching collaboration. So our objectives for this module: I can understand how PBL requires a culture of collaboration rather than cooperation. I will determine how I will group students, gather tips for managing student groups, and develop a group contract, including authentic roles and norms. So, why groups? So collaboration is one of those essential 21st century skills. And what's nice about collaboration is it actually facilitates the teaching, practice, and assessing of other 21st century skills like communication, empathy, those sort of things. And depending on the task, structured and leveraged appropriately, groups can make teachers, students, and learning more effective and efficient. There's also the fact that students are just innately social beings, and so you leverage that engagement piece of being social but towards learning and use it that way. So in terms of grouping students, again, I just bring up the fact that you're going to use groups to facilitate instruction, but you need to also ensure that groups are functioning at a level where all group members are moving and growing and learning, and not where those situations where maybe one group member is carrying the others. I noted a difference between collaboration and cooperation. So cooperation is just working together and that sort of thing. Our culture specifically, I think, with the nature of competition, does collaboration very dysfunctionally. So especially in a school context. So kids sometimes compete with each other based on grades or based on performance or those sort of things. And what we're asking them to do is actually a very difficult thing, I think, for us even culturally, where we're working together to improve not only ourselves but those around us. And so that's a bit of a shift sometimes for kids and for teachers. So how will students be grouped? You need to think about this. So here are some recommendations from BIE. So they suggest that you, not students, choose the group members. They say that you should select students who will work well together, have a range of skills and perspectives. They say that students waste time and energy negotiating group composition. And finally, student choice can lead to social isolation or alienation. So this is something to keep in mind, especially depending on your teaching style. Should you be the one that strategically groups students, and there are some resources out there for you to do that through Kagan and other places. We'll talk about Kagan in a bit. They suggest that you get students into their groups early and that you do team building exercises, and you do them at least once a week. Evaluate group strengths and weaknesses. Establish norms, so general group norms and specific group norms. So norms are what we're committed to as a group to ensure the success and functionality of our groups. Group contracts, which we'll look at here in a minute a little bit more in depth, help here. And then brainstorming sessions. So list of ideas or concept map based on the driving question, examine alternate approaches, secondary questions, connections, etc., and determine management structures. So task lists, initial plans, who, when, that sort of thing. Finally, group contracts. So components of group contracts include norms, which I said established by you, established by the students, or established by both. Maybe an absence policy, so what do we do when somebody is absent in our group? How will our work come together, and how will we work together in the work policy? Specific roles and responsibilities, which again can be teacher defined or student defined, and that's on a continuum of that student choice piece. Distribution of work, so you can have milestones that are group milestones, you can have milestones that are individual milestones, you can have milestones where one group member is accountable for that piece and another group member is accountable for a different piece. Group contracts can stipulate how leadership is going to be organized, how do we dismiss a member or fire them as it's come to be known, and then finally a space for signatures to sign that contract to then hold students accountable to what they've committed to. So here's some tips from my experience. Having a group know, need to know space. So a place for students to think about the functioning of their groups. I would model small group success. To that end, each day is a new start with a group. Because otherwise it gets in the way of the progress. Share stories from your own triumphs or struggles in small groups and as a teacher. So without using names, sometimes those dysfunctional group work things that we do in our profession are great things to share with students. And think about how people are motivated in groups, how people sometimes manipulate groups, that sort of thing. Conflict resolution strategies. So intervene early when you see groups breaking down. Utilize timeouts sometimes to just give people space, promote self-management, and have daily conversations, either one-on-one with group members about their functioning in group or with entire teams. And then there's always that question about, are you fired? And do you fire kids? And if you put that in place with a structure, yes, kids can be fired from a group. So using groups and group roles to manage the workload as well. So once you've crafted your milestones that progress towards that product or presentation, and once you've thought about mini lessons and things like that, think about what milestones could be checked in a group context. So what ones should be checked individually. And then you run workshops with specific group roles is another suggestion. So this is the idea where you pull a tech person from each group and only work with those 4 to 8 to 10 10 leaders of tech or of collaboration, of critical thinking. You pull those team leaders to do a certain part of the unit, and then they go relay that content learning or piece back to the group, and then you check for understanding with all of those folks. So consider, how do you use groups and group roles to manage the process, and it's not all driven by you or held accountable by you. This is an example of a milestone sheet, and one of the nice things about this one is you can see who's they're assigned to with specific student names. So you have Matt here and Madeline here, and then what are they accountable for together. So they can claim specific pieces, but then what do they need to complete together to progress through that learning. Here's another way to think about that concept I talked about with where you have a team leader. This is the way you can meet with those team leaders. So if you're in the top box as the teacher, maybe you meet with each team leader and then you're able to impact instruction with those folks. And so those roles become very important. This is another way to think about an organizational chart of how to reach and work with each kid. So each kid has maybe a different role for the entire unit is another way that teachers have approached this. So give you a chance to look at that. And so then I just wanted to provide some structures or some resources for cooperative, collaborative learning. So one is Kagan structures. Kagan are cooperative learning structures. They organize the classroom instruction. They describe how the teachers and students interact with the curriculum. They're content free and repeatable. So these are specific structures that get kids to collaborate. They're used to explore the curriculum. They can be used repeatedly with different curriculum. And then they implement the 5 basic principles of cooperative learning. So there's positive interdependence, individual accountability, equal participation, and simultaneous interaction. So those are kind of the tenets of Kagan structures. And there's a ton of those. If you just Google Kagan, you can find all kinds of resources for that. Another resource I wanted to put out in this module is the National School Reform Faculty, and the website's there. One of them that they're really famous for in PBL circles is the Critical Friends Protocol, and so this is a feedback structure that we see very, very often in PBL of an I like, I wonder, next steps. So you, when looking at somebody's work, you say, well, here's something I like, here's something I wonder, which is more of a question, and it can't be a suggestion, and then next steps can be a suggestion of how to move forward or how to tweak some of that. So just to connect some things here, in your entry document or event, you're going to explain group structures. So this is the point where maybe you need to, as you move into drafting that entry document or event, capture on this form specifically in box G and H. So in the culminating products or presentations, think about what students could be accountable for as a group, and then specifically what group structures and authentic roles could you use there in box H. So this concludes our exercises in examining PBL with leveraging student groups and teaching collaboration. If you're following these modules in sequence, the next one is drafting an entry document, an entry event. In the entry document or event module, you're going to synthesize your learning to draft a document and event to engage your students and launch the inquiry. And you will likely use your thinking here about groups in that document as you draft and articulate how students will work together. Thanks.